It's kind of, I think, where we may possibly be going, which is lately we've been experimenting a lot with trying to have, we did something with Snickers, we're doing something with Pepsi, we've done some stuff with AT&T, where they're integrated into our show in a way, but it's comedy that we like. It's comedy that we always tell them, if it's not funny to us, I can't do it. Because you lose, I lose, everyone loses. We can't, if I hold up a Snickers bar and say, no, there's nothing like it, I'm not sure that's their slogan, and it probably shouldn't be, but if I hold up a Snickers bar and bite into it and disingenuously try and promote it,
right.
I'm dead, my credibility's gone, Snickers isn't helped, nothing works.
And Kevin, did Universal come to you on that, or did they go directly to you, Conan? How did that work out?
They came in through us, through traditional ad sales, but that's what we're trying to do. He's got a whole unity setting up now for branded content because he knows how to walk the line so perfectly. And we're happy if more of it lives in that area rather than traditional spots.
Because you've talked about, we don't need a huge introduction. Obviously, Conan O'Brien is Conan O'Brien. Kevin Riley runs TBS and TNT. Conan O'Brien is appearing mainly on TBS, although also on YouTube.
Are you on another network now too?
Yeah, I went back to NBC. Those guys are great.
Breaking it here.
I'm on TBS exclusively.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, but you've talked a lot, Kevin, about earlier this year you talked about how you're remaking the place, and one of the things you're doing is you're lowering the ad load, like you're letting people see more programming. And for something like this,
it's a good formula. We're spending more and we're giving away some of the revenue, so that's a nice formula we have. But that just simply comes from trying to be more tuned into the consumer experience and how people want to watch television. And I think it's something that every advertiser will admit, that the ad is more effective when it's in a better environment. And we have stuffed the airwaves with too many ads. Our early results have been encouraging by the test. We're beginning to do it on TNT right now, but clients like it. We have to show that ROI, that it actually pays, because we're going to charge them more. That's a very simple formula. If it's more effective, we're going to charge more. This year we were able to write that business, and if we can going forward, we'll continue with it.
So do people who watch that know that they're seeing a promo for, they don't know that they're seeing a promo for the movie?
No.
But they just see
the
Kevin
best
Hart
is if they don't know. They know that what happens is when that remote is done and they come back to me live in the studio, I say, Ride Along 2 is coming out October 5th. We got a great show tonight. Whether we do or not, I say that. And then it's what you do in this business. And that is how it... So at the end, all we have to do is do that one quick mention.
And then they're cool.
Yes. And I think that is something that we keep working on again and again and again, which are ways that I can get a good creative experience. This is my 24th year doing a late night talk show. I'm 44. Do the math. And it's an actual incredible experience. At this point, I should be phoning it in, but because the business is changing so much, I find myself often working harder now than I did in 1997.
Well, this is what I love we all feel this way. But when we talked earlier about, I guess it was in 1993 when you got The Late Show, and you were there talking to Johnny Carson and Jack Parr, and you have the pictures of that. I
had an amazing experience, which is I have a house in Connecticut that I hung on to, this small house in Connecticut. It's really not that small. Sorry, by your standards. But anyway, I got this house, and I had a lot of boxes there from over the years, and I recently had them sent to Los Angeles. And I opened one the other day, and there's a picture of me with Johnny Carson that I hadn't seen in a while. And it was when I had recently just been announced. I have a congratulatory letter from Jack Parr that is on a font from a typewriter that looks like it's from the 1920s. It looks like a dispatch from the Korean front. It's just this insane. And in the letter, he says, wear blue shirts, get a dog, and marry a good woman. And I did all those things. And then I have a letter from Steve Allen that says, good luck on your latest assignment. If you need help, contact me. And so I come from that old,
Yeah.
that's what I came from. And my job was to take over the mantle of the traditional classic late night show. Last week, I was in New York shooting a VR segment, virtual reality segment at YouTube that couldn't be further from the world that I started in. I mean, the gap between where I began, it's a little like I grew up living with my grandmother, and when she was born, there were no automobiles, and she lived to be almost 100, and she died, during about 3 years after the Challenger blew up. She saw all of that in one lifetime.
Right.
I think that's what we're kind of experiencing. I think that's almost how I feel if any of those old late night hosts were alive today and saw what it is we were doing now, how it's experienced, they wouldn't even recognize it.
But I'm not sure that everybody even knows really what he's been doing and the way it's evolved, and as sort of even a microcosm of what we're hoping to do, which is we've known each other for 15-something years, and I came to the place and we were going to invest in some programming, and before I even
How did you meet? How did you two
at
We were
NBC.
lovers.
At NBC.
Yeah, and at NBC.
I did a few tours of duty there, and we got to know each other. And in fact, before he went to TBS, I was actually trying to get him over at Fox when I was there. But we had dinner before I even officially started, and I just said, hey, I loved when you were out in transition and you were doing concerts and you had that crazy thing. And do you have any ideas to mix up the show? And he goes, well, I do have a few ideas. And I'm thinking about, I just started doing these little videos that seem to be taking off. And shortly thereafter, he said, we've got this invitation to go to Cuba. And I want to go to Cuba. I said, go to Cuba. And then he booked a thing in Comic-Con. Then he started doing more videos. And the videos started going viral. And by the way, while being personal friends with Steve Allen, he also has the youngest audience base of any of the talk shows. So he has a very young, to this day, audience. People you said many of whom weren't even born when you first came out.
Yeah, I almost find it kind of unbecoming. When I walk around in the world, the people that are most ardent, most sort of intense, emotional fans are usually about 18 years old. And it's because they've watched this content that they really love. We do something called Clueless Gamer, where it started in our digital wing. I just started on a lark reviewing video games and having the audacity to review video games because I'm terrible at them and I don't like them. And so I would review the top games and we put them out online with this guy who ran our digital department. Back then it was one guy, Aaron Blair. Those eventually started to catch on. We were contacted by the biggest gaming companies, and they said, the gaming community loves them. We will pay you and give you a sneak peek at our newest game, which we spent 10 years and $2 billion developing. If you please will play the game with Wiz Khalifa, or if you'll play the game with a celebrity. And so we do, and I always tell them ahead of time, I'm going to trash the game. I'm going to make fun of the game. You in no way have editorial control. And what's great is they say, no problem, you have no credibility as a gamer. And in this magical way, because I have no credibility, it's a good business arrangement.
Right.
We're very upfront about it. The gaming community loves it. So now I travel the world now. We take our show on to different cities now, and I go places, and people that don't speak English or speak rudimentary English or speak English well but have never been to the United States love Clueless Gamer. And they are not even aware of my pedigree. They may not even know that I wrote for The Simpsons or that I worked in the 90s and 2000s for NBC. They have no idea. They don't care.
So when you used to think about late night comedy, it was that everybody had a show. It was on a different network, and you picked your person, you picked your show, and you would watch that. And everybody would pull from the same headlines and sort of give a slightly different riff on the same thing.
Yep.
Now, not everyone, but a lot of people are watching the next day on YouTube. They're just going to see what they heard about was funny, whatever went viral. How does that change the way you think about making comedy?
When these shows began, if you look at the history of them, NBC was the first. They invented the late night format, and it was someone realized there's a revenue stream here. We're not showing anything at 11:30, and that's really how the Tonight Show began.
Right.
And we're talking 1950, 1951. And they were time-filling shows, and if you watch those shows, it was about creating a certain tone over 2 hours or an hour and a half. And you would stick with the show. That's how I watched Johnny Carson with my dad. You would stick through the show, and you would see certain themes. So when I took over the late night show in '93, what was so important to me is to have certain themes carry out throughout the night. And I remembered one week, we used to do a lot of things where one week we kept saying, and our final guest will be Dirk Bickman, author of this new biography of Lincoln, and I kept bumping him every night. And it was fake, but I just kept bumping him every night and saying, we didn't get time for Dirk Bickman, we'll get him tomorrow, and then the next night. And then finally on Friday, I said Dirk Bickman, and we had an actor come out, and he was pissed. And he played it so well. We played it so, it was kind of an Andy Kaufman thing. And he was like, oh, well, I guess you didn't have time. You know, you couldn't do that today.
Right.
Because you cannot, everyone is experiencing these shows a la carte. They're saying, no one, it's very hard. It's very few people. Obviously, there are audiences that still do watch these shows through, but I think younger people, most people, and they're busy, they pick and choose. And so I think the trick, and it's no one up here, none of us can pretend we've figured it out. What I love about TBS, what I love about Kevin's attitude is try things, keep trying things, we'll find it. And we're finding it in little ways. We're finding it in small ways, ways in which we can get the branded content so that it works. It works for us as a business, it works for TBS as a business, but also figure out ways that we can help promote other TBS shows. You know,
but the microcosm of it all is that this is, he can sit there and say, I'm going into the studio, I've been doing this a long time, I know what I'm doing and I'm tired of doing it, so I'm just going to do the show. If it goes up on YouTube, that's what they'll watch it, fine. Or you lean into it and say, okay, let's follow the audience where they are. And let's begin to extend this brand out into different tentacles that just really started organically with him following his instincts and say, I think it'll be fun to go on the road. I think it'll be fun to go to Comic-Con. I think it'll be fun to do this ride-along video. But then we look at it, we say, well, wait a minute, all of a sudden this Clueless Gamer, that's actually a show. So we're going to be doing a show.
Right.
He's been shepherding stand-up comics along for a long time. I think you're the only talk show that still features them regularly. I have a lot of comics who are indebted to him. We're about to launch a stand-up comedy business, how we introduce those people and bring those personalities along and ultimately use his brand, I'm going to use the word platform. We have to pay $1, whoever uses platform. But he does have an enormous platform. Television is still an enormous launch pad. How do we take all of this activity, bring these people along that's good for them, and ultimately will be good for our business, if you will? That's the talk show's at the center of it, but there's different tentacles.
Why does it make sense for you two to be in partnership together? Conan, why don't you go and launch your own thing? You could do it on YouTube. You could do it wherever you wanted. And you
that sounds fantastic.
You could find...
I am always been extremely aware of the power of Turner, TBS, their ability to market, their ability to, I mean, it's a giant machine, and what we've built now is a hybrid. My show is a hybrid. It's a linear digital hybrid. Now the ratio is going to change. You know, we've had to. The most interesting thing about my career is that it is how many times I've had to adapt. I could probably point to 5 different times in my career where I've had to change and adapt, and I have found that rather than be afraid of that, initially there's fear. If you go towards it, which is probably the experience of a lot of people here, if you go towards it, many experiments will fail, but it's much more interesting. It's fascinating, and when you hit on something new and it works, it's exhilarating. And I'm not jaded. I've been doing this a really long time. I got into comedy in 1985, and I'm still thrilled by the possibilities of what we could do creatively. And the fact that the business is changing is not frightening me. It's exhilarating, and what works is to have, I think what's great about Kevin coming in is he's saying, we're going to try a lot of things. We're going to build a stable of great shows. We are going to generate great buzz, and we're going to get TBS and Turner. We're going to keep evolving it.
Right.
And I love being with people like that because they encourage me. They never tell me, don't do this, don't do that. I had to, during the that skit we just showed, I think we were told to say that it wasn't marijuana. Technically, it may not have been marijuana. But other than that.
But it really was.
What's that?
But it really was.
Or was it? You don't know.
So in that, I mean.
It was marijuana.
So in that regard, was
marijuana.
getting kicked off the Tonight Show the best thing that ever happened? I mean, now you would just be, was getting kicked off the Tonight Show the best thing that ever happened to you?
Technically, it wasn't kicked off.
Oh.
Move along.
Let's do our research. I chose not to go to 1205. Big difference. Some say a heroic stand.
It was all going well.
Others, yeah, a fool's errand. No, no, I wouldn't say it was. I think I'm very fatalistic about these things and philosophical about them. But I think that my timing with that wasn't right, given, I mean, historically you look at it, my timing with that wasn't right. And with people, whether they wanted to move on or not, the whole thing was very complicated. But I've come to really appreciate the tour that I did right afterwards is what propelled me into social media.
Right.
I did not choose social media.
Right.
Social media was an absolute necessity for me to survive. Anyone else in my situation 10 years earlier would have just gone away. Mm-hmm. But there was such a grassroots explosion of love and support in 2010 when my situation with NBC went down, and I was caught unaware. I didn't realize that
you didn't realize that was going to happen?
I didn't. No, no one would. I didn't realize that. I didn't understand. I mean, I'm a bit of a Luddite. I'm not someone who's. I'm embracing these technologies, and I know a lot more about them now. But I was very much taken by surprise, and so we use that. I mean, basically, because I was legally not allowed to be on television, I started a Twitter account, which blew up overnight. That's how I sold out a national tour. We sold out a national tour without any advertising, a live tour, because we went on Twitter, which later became a model for other people saying, I want to do what Conan did for my concert, and that led into TBS. And I've been committed to digital ever since, because without it, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have a career. That saved me.
We're going to have to open up to questions in a little bit, but I first want to ask, what would it mean today if you were offered the Tonight Show?
Pardon me, what's that?
I'm starting to feel like Andy Richter, by the way. I know what Andy feels like now. I gotta go.
No, you don't. You don't know what Andy feels like. There's a lot of things you need to, a lot of pills you need to take before you understand what Andy Richter feels like. He's on a horse tranquilizer. I think these shows are defined by the host so much that the label has become, and that was revelatory to me, is that I grew up, Carson was my hero, and I grew up with a whole generation of people that were like, hosting that show is what's important.
Right.
But it really is, they're so personality driven. There's such a cult of personality that you could say it increasingly became irrelevant to me. I'm really happy doing what I'm doing. I'm in a partnership. The word that Kevin uses a lot is agile. He wants us to be agile, and it's my favorite word that he uses. It's like, because it speaks to me, we want to be able to respond quickly. We want to be able to change when we need to change. If the old format or if some part of the old format isn't working for us anymore, let go of it. Just let it go. And don't be afraid to do that. Don't hang on to the 1951 model of what this show needs to be. Constantly play with it. And if it ends up that my show is a saline solution that you drop in your eye, but it's under the Turner brand, I'll be happy with that. That's fine.
And Kevin, you've talked about remaking the media, the remaking TBS and TNT and the media business into something much more consumer focused.
Yeah.
Versus something sort of top down.
Well, we never were. Our clients were our advertising clients.
Right.
We're consumer brands. So we always had the audience, which was really just sort of somewhat arbitrary demographic breaks. And even though we all wanted audience and sort of took them for granted, we never really thought about the consumer experience. And there's one thing that's, I think, very good that's come out of the environment today is people do have on-demand choices and use them, and do have mobile devices and use them. We've had to think about that, yes, content is king, and the level of fandom that we have, that we've taken for granted, is an enormous equity. And it's an equity that we really have not even mined to a certain extent. Sure, we sell our properties, we distribute our services, but the equity that you see when somebody like Conan goes on the floor of Comic-Con and engages with fans, there can be, not to overstate it, but there literally can be businesses. We can mine those deeper. When you have a Game of Thrones, the tentacles and extensions that could be mined from that, I think as a business in general, we haven't really made use of that. But the experience, the consumer experience itself, we're just much more mindful of. So you can hang on to it. You can hang on to a talk show and then throw your hands up in the air that they're watching it on YouTube. Or you can look at the brand and say, there's different tentacles now. How do we throw different little mini businesses around those brands? And in some cases, it might be a little bit of revenue, might be a little bit of pocket, but those pockets of fandom, particularly on the passionate ends, have real value. So that's a little 4-second version of it, but I think there's going to be some interesting expressions of it in the next year or so in terms of where we're going with it.
That's really interesting. Do we have any questions in the audience? Great. Then I get to keep asking you questions.
What the hell was that? There's no question?
The end of the day.
No, it's.
I think they're watching the debate on their iPhones.
Speaking of the debate,
Yes.
Speaking of the debate, what are you guys looking forward to?
Who you're voting for.
What's that?
What are you looking forward to in the debate? Do you have any advice for the candidates tonight?
I'm the least qualified person in this room to answer that. It needs to end. It needs to stop. Right?
That you have a lot of support. You're going to get a lot of support.
It's a sad, sad spectacle, and it needs to stop.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay, but are you doing any kind of political comedy these days?
I do. Yeah, I'm probably the least. It's interesting. I've never been a out-and-out political comic. When we have a funny idea that works for me on that level, we do it. But there is so much really good political comedy, and so many shows that devote themselves exclusively to political comedy. And I've always, as you can see, what I like to do. I like to be with real people. I like to make reactive comedy. I'm sort of maybe old school in that way, but I think it has a long shelf life. That's something that I really love about it, is that people can look at my bits. A funny bit of mine from 1995 is still, I think, really funny. I could show it to an 18-year-old today, and they weren't born at the time, but they would laugh at it.
Right.
I think if it was a good, funny piece of classic comedy, I think those are the things that I'm mostly working off of. It doesn't mean we don't do political comedy, and we do, but it is not something that we pursue relentlessly because it's not where my passion lies, and we have so many people out there that do it brilliantly.
One question.
Oh, we have a questioner. Yes.
First time to the summit from New Orleans. I'm Kristen, Jambalaya Girl. And I want to ask, during that time when you just had Twitter, who is important to you? Who was your team?
My team at the time was literally one guy, Aaron Blayard. That was it. He was the only one that understood. And that's not true. There's another person who we used who's a brilliant woman named Sybil Goldman, who I knew through my wife, and she was the one that said, no, definitely you got to go on Twitter. And it was such a moment in time. You can't recreate it, but it was such a unique moment that I relied on these two people, and I started a Twitter account, and we launched it, and it started to blow up, and then we announced the tour, and it was one tweet. We announced the tour with one tweet that linked you to a Team Coco site. And Team Coco was something, Tom Hanks was on the air interviewing me once on The Tonight Show, and he started calling me Coco for some reason that I still don't understand. I don't think he understands. And so we became Team Coco. And that's what happened, is we announced the tour, it sold out. So yeah, I would say it started, we were working, I didn't have a place to work, so I was working out of my home, and also my assistant, who's here tonight at the time, Sona, who's been with me this whole time, she and I went to an Applebee's in the Valley, and I had The Tonight Show the week before, and now I was in an Applebee's working off of a laptop and launching a national tour, and it was exhilarating. The whole thing was exhilarating, terrifying, but exhilarating. But yeah, it started out with, and now I have a guy, Steve Beslow, who came to us from Funny or Die, who's absolutely brilliant, and I do as he says. He's my guru. He says, do this. This is what we're going to do next. YouTube wants you to go and try out this latest VR headset, and it's going to be done in such a way that when we release, this will be I'm doing a week of shows at the Apollo in 2 weeks. You're going to see my experience VR. You're going to see me in the VR helmet. You're going to see everything all at once through a new technology, and we're the first people to get to do it. And it's a very funny remote. And so now I have a massive, increasingly growing machine, but it started with essentially 1 or 2 people.
We only have time for one more question. I wish you guys would have stood up slightly earlier, but go ahead and ask yours.
Hey there, Peter Volinsky from iHeartMedia. So you had mentioned that your audiences are getting younger. So my question to you is, do you find that you're able to get those audiences by listening to them and creating content that they want, or by introducing them to something that they never thought they'd want?
You're probably giving me too much credit for thinking about it. And I don't even mean that as a joke. I do things and they're successful or they're not. The things that I've done that have, I think the instant poison in this business is any whiff of condescension, any whiff at all of, you're going to like this because this is what you guys like, you 18-year-olds, you. I think the minute they hear that, especially done like that, that's horrifying. So I think it is one of the things that has helped me immeasurably in my career, and again, this is the kind of thing where Kevin is never tried to make me or get me to be something I'm not. He just wants me to do my thing, which is why this has been such a successful partnership. But one of the things that's always worked for me is to say, I'm very honest about who I am. I'm very self-deprecating about the things I can't do. I never try to be cool. I'm very honest about the fact that I'm not cool. And so, I do the comedy that I think is funny. That happens to have given me a young audience. That's it. I didn't go after a young audience. I think if I had pursued a young audience, I would have failed. I think pursuing a young crowd is inherently flawed concept. So that's how I go at it. And I don't know how other people work, but it's just happened to work for me. I make it, and people like it or they don't, and I've been fortunate that this seems to resonate with younger people.
I'm sorry we can't.
You seem deeply unsatisfied by my which is what I'm here to do, because I'm not getting paid.
Thank you guys both so much.
Thank you.
That was great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.